Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Forgive me if I adopt some strange postures while I'm talking. I've pinched a nerve in my neck, and I'll have to adjust my right arm from time to time. Solid Cambridge Transport is a group of volunteers, impartial. We have no political allegiance, we have no connections to any businesses. We're just trying to figure out the best solutions for transport for the region, for Cambridge and South Cambridgeshire, a connected, integrated, holistic solution for the region. And I'm going to focus this evening on parking, because that's one of the issues that I know is a particular concern here, as it is in a number of other parts of the city. Now, what is the problem? And you will all have identified some aspects of these problems, but actually you may not have grasped just how big the problem is and what the ramifications are. You'll obviously be aware of the inconvenience to yourselves and to your visitors. The fact that the roads are full of commuters taking up all the spaces does cause problems. There's also a problem for local shops. If those spaces are all taken up, then people can't stop to drop in and pop into a shop. It also is a real problem for carers, health visitors and tradesmen trying to visit homes. They can't park near the home, so they have to park a long way away, or they have to park illegally and take a ticket. It's become, as you can well imagine, with a growing elderly population, the number of carers and health visitors moving around Cambridge is growing enormously, and this is a real problem. It's a waste of time and it's a waste of money. The fact that the delivery vehicles have to double park because they can't pull over, it causes obstructions. The fact that vehicles are parked near junctions, it causes obstructions and danger for people who are walking and cycling. But those are just the local issues. Those are the ones that would be most obvious to you. But actually the commuter parking contributes to the problem of congestion throughout the city. On just two roads, Adams Road and Rostat Road, together, 250 vehicles park every day. They're not residents, they're not their visitors. These are people coming from outside the city. And I think it's reasonable to extrapolate across the whole city that there's at least 2,000 people coming into the city and parking for free in residential streets. It could well be double that, but let's just take it as 2,000 as a conservative estimate. Now there's 42,500 people who drive into Cambridge every day. That's out of about 85,000 people who work in Cambridge and who are moving either from Cambridge or from outside Cambridge to come in. But 42,500 are driving into the city every day. That includes 7,500 people who live in the city and drive to another part of the city. Now, if we eliminated free commuter parking, that 2,000 vehicles coming into the city every day represents 5% reduction in traffic and pollution. Now, that doesn't sound like very much, but actually, the reduction in traffic in school holidays is measured at only 6.5% reduction on Milton Road. And we all know how different it feels when the traffic and how much quieter the roads seem to be in the school holidays. And it's not a big difference. It's just that when roads are nearly full, a small amount of extra traffic creates congestion and then gridlock. So a small reduction can make a big difference. Now, the other problem with parking is that it undermines the alternatives. It undermines the park and ride. It undermines public transport. Now, since they introduced the £1 charge at the park and ride sites, there's been a 14% sustained reduction in use. And that equates to about 425 cars a day. Now, some of those people may have gone back to taking a bus from near to home, but I would guess that a good chunk of those people now drive into the city and park somewhere in the city. And that 425 cars a day equates to £150,000 a day lost in revenue to the county council just through that £1 parking charge. Now the reason they raised that charge is because, as you well know, we're in an age of austerity. The central government is withdrawing money from councils. So they're having to focus the resources they have on the essential services, on caring, on social care, on school, on education, and so money is being taken away from things where it is relatively easy to provide money in another way or to charge directly, and parking is an obvious one. But in addition to that £150,000, £500,000 has been lost by Stagecoach. Now you might not care about that. I mean, Stagecoach is a private company. You're not, unless you're a shareholder, you wouldn't care. But if there's £500,000 not being spent on travelling by bus, That's £500,000 not being paid to drivers, not being paid to lease buses, which means there's less of a service. So that means the park and ride services are less frequent and they don't operate as long hours. And that makes the service less convenient to people, because if you don't work 9 to 5, as probably most of us don't these days, you need to have some flexibility. If you want to stay for a drink after work, you need the buses still to be running when you walk out of the pub. The point is if we could get 2,000 or more people using public transport and park and ride instead of driving into the city, that would equate to £3 million a year of additional revenue for the bus operators and the county council. That would provide much better bus services, i.e. more frequent, operating for more hours of the day, and more money for essential council services. It's a win-win, really. So what have we got now as far as residence parking is? Well, that's the map of the residence parking schemes that are in place at the moment. They all operate 9 to 5 or 9 to 8, and everybody in those areas has to buy a permit for their own vehicles, and they have to buy a permit for their visitors. And it's about £80 a year per vehicle, and £1.60 a day for a visitor. Now, you'll probably remember from the local papers how in Freville there was a huge amount of acrimony about introducing that new scheme. And there's lots of other schemes that have tried and failed to get introduced. And it's because of this piecemeal approach, which just doesn't work. It works in the centre of the city where the problem is really acute. But once you go a bit further out, this one-size-fits-all solution doesn't work for people. Because a lot of the people that have off-street parking, they don't see any benefit in having these parking controls directly. Because they don't see the indirect impact of having all these people parking on the streets. And the fact that residents have to demonstrate a majority in favour of residence parking creates division. It's a hugely, people have devoted years to their lives to trying to get residence parking in. And it angers all the people in areas outside there, because they just know that if they do get a parking scheme there, it's going to push the problem out into their area too. So we need a different approach. And what we're proposing is a really simple process. You start by defining the extent of that you want to consider for parking controls. Now, you could start with just the boundary of the city. Unfortunately, the boundary of the city, as far as the city council is concerned, is not ideal. It excludes like Orchard Park and it cuts Cherry Hinton in half. So thought needs to be going into working out what the boundaries are. There may be just some areas where there is just absolutely no interest in parking controls, and there's no point in trying to rope them into a consultation on this. But the next step is, once we've actually figured out, okay, where might we need controls, let's now consult closely with local residents and businesses. And it's important that we include both. And what we need the council to do is to present a menu of options, because there's lots of different parking controls we can use. It doesn't have to be residents only between 9 and 5. It could be residents only for 1 hour a day, which just prevents commuters parking. It doesn't massively inconvenience residents. And it would be much quicker and much cheaper to control. But you can have just a limited wait bay. So you can park there for half an hour, 2 hours, but you can't return within 4 hours. That's ideal for close to shops. You can have disc parking, which is used in a number of cities. You can have single yellow lines that just simply set hours in which you can't park. What I'm saying is that there's lots of options, and actually they're all detailed on our website. But the point is that you should be empowered to choose which controls are most appropriate where in your area. So on a street where you've got some shops, you would have different controls from a street where you've got lots of residents all with off-street parking. So it's a one-size-fits-all approach won't work. What we need is the council to help facilitate a consultation that allows you to be involved in designing the scheme. And then it can be trialled, and there's something called an experimental traffic regulation order, which is specifically designed for this type of thing. where you don't really know whether you want it, you don't quite know what the impact's going to be. So you design it, and you tell people, look, you don't have to go with this, but let's just try it. And if after 6 months you don't like it or it's not working, and during that 6 months you can tweak the system. So if there are, some of those hours aren't quite right, perhaps the limited wait is too short, it's relatively straightforward just to amend that. And once you've experienced it for 6 months, then you probably you'll be much more confident about whether it's actually what you want and what you need. And it's a bit like, you don't buy a car by looking at the brochure, looking at the specification of the engine size and all the rest of it. You take it for a test drive. And it's the experience of driving the car that tells you whether, yes, this will work for me. Yes, I can fit stuff in the boot just the way I want to. Yes, it can fit all the people I need to. So look, why don't we do the same with traffic control, with parking controls? We just experience it for 6 months and then have a referendum. And if there's a majority that don't like it, well then you just take them out. But of course, parking controls is only one part of the transport solution we need for the region. And we mustn't pretend that even though we might be able to reduce congestion by 5%, that that's going to have a lasting effect for the region. And also all those people that do drive into the city, we're now going to make them pay, possibly take a less convenient bus service. So actually, there's going to be a quid pro quo on this. We've got to give something to those people in South Cambridgeshire who need to work in the city and who can't afford to live in the city. So what we need, we've got a whole programme of suggestions, which includes building many more park and ride sites. There'll be generally not smaller park and rides. If any of you have seen along Stanton on the guided busway, that's more the sort of model for the park and ride sites that we might have throughout South Cambridgeshire in rural centres. I mean, even going out as far as places like Linton, but certainly Cambourne. I mean, Cambourne is a place where there are apparently only 2 bus shelters. I haven't seen them. But most of the bus stops are just a pole in the ground in some cases by a dual carriageway, without either the path to the bus stop. You have to walk across a grass verge. So you can imagine on a wet, rainy day, you're going to ruin your shoes, you're going to stand there in the pouring rain, looking like a loser. Why would anyone travel by bus? And that's the experience we expect people to put up with.
To go to a city deal meeting.
Well, right, indeed.
Sorry, done it.
Well, nearly, I tried. I missed the bus. We also need many more. There's much more potential in the train services, particularly the Newmarket line. We could have a train station at Fulbourn that serves Teversham, Cherry Hinton, and Fulbourn. It's about 20,000 houses that would be within easy walking or cycling distance of that station. And with a train station at Addenbrooke's, you'd be able to get a direct train from Fulbourn straight to Addenbrooke's. That would take thousands of vehicles off the road. Putting a more frequent service on that line would make Newmarket a much more attractive commuter town. In fact, only 15%, although Newmarket is about the same size as Ely, only about 15% as many of the people use the train service as do in Ely. And that's simply because the train service is Ely, it's frequent, it runs long hours, it's pretty reliable, and it takes you straight to the city. So why don't we do the same on the Newmarket line too? Bus services we need to have express bus services. You may have seen the Haverhill service is the X13. It runs express from Haverhill. It's an attractive service, very popular. What we need is that type of service all around the region, so that people who want to commute into the city can get on a bus that doesn't wind its way through the back streets of lots of villages. It just takes them straight to Cambridge, and then provides an easy interchange to another service that can then take them on to the Science Park or Addenbrooke's or wherever it is that they need to get to. We need to reduce the pain points in public transport. I mean, it's lack of information, lack of transparency in pricing, the complexity of paying. I mean, the fact you can't do as you do in London, just use your debit card or credit card, and the fact you have to buy 2 tickets if your journey happens to require a change of bus. I mean, it's madness. You want to go from A to B, if it has to take 2 buses, you shouldn't have to buy 2 tickets. We also need much better walking and cycling infrastructure. We're a cycling city, but actually the quality of the infrastructure is pretty lousy. You go to anywhere on the continent, particularly somewhere like the Netherlands or Germany, it's people of all ages, from 3 to 93, are comfortable cycling pretty much anywhere. They don't wear lycra because they have segregated cycle routes, because are kept away from them. Pedestrians are kept away from cyclists that they're not conflicting. And many, many more people would be happy to cycle if we had better infrastructure, and we could do a lot more with that. And the last thing comes under this heading, smart traffic management. It encompasses, at the very most basic level, just upgrading and integrating the traffic signals so they work together better, so that we can actually control the flow of traffic through the city and deal with problems. So when there's an incident on the M11 and suddenly all the traffic's being diverted down Barton Road, we don't create a gridlock in the city automatically. We actually have traffic signals that are automatically tuned to dealing with that situation, so we don't end up with the problems that we routinely have. I mean, it's at least a weekly problem there. But also there's something called inbound flow control, which I'm not going to go into detail now. You can find it on our website. But it's a way of moving where people wait. So rather than waiting on the roads coming into the city, where they can block junctions, they fill up the filter lanes, they block the buses, what you do is you hold those vehicles a little bit further out on the edge of the city. You provide a bypass just there. So effectively you have a bus lane just on the edge of the city that takes them to the front of the queue there, and then all the traffic flows smoothly from that point on. And it's just, it needs the upgraded signals, and then one can just experiment with it. It's not an all or nothing. It can be turned up, turned down, and the default is that it's no different from now. I mean, just the traffic comes into the city freely. But it does have a lot of potential for improving congestion in the city. And but the most important thing is it means we don't have to build bus lanes right into the city centre, where it's destroying important approach roads into the city by widening them, putting a lot more tarmac. If we're going to widen the roads at all, it should be for cycle lanes, not for bus lanes.
Okay.
And as I say, you can find a lot more on our website, smartertransport.uk. Thank you very much.
Okay. Thank you very much, Edward. Are you happy to answer a couple of questions now? Okay, has anyone got any questions that they would like to ask Edward specifically about his ideas? Hi, yeah. Do you want to stand up, please, and say
Hello, thank you for organising tonight, by the way.
okay,
Very good.
Thank you.
I'm Jerry Robinson and I live in Newnham, obviously. Quick question about living in the centre, and it's very difficult to get around town if you're not feeling well and you can't use your bike. Various trips to the Addenbrooks, you can't get there if you need to get to the train station. I couldn't see anywhere on there about public transport across the city and around the city, and maybe using ring roads and how you might do that. I didn't know, they're probably in there somewhere, but I couldn't see where it would fit in. Thank you.
It's a good question.
Absolutely, yeah. Part of reorganising bus services, I touched on express services and feeder services, and that's primarily outside the city. But in the city, what we'd like to see is, rather than all the buses going into Drummer Street and then you having to figure out where the other stop is that you then catch your connecting bus, that the buses come to the inner ring road and they circulate around the inner ring road, and you can change to any other service in that way. So you would come in, so you from here you would be able to catch the you can walk to the inner ring road from here, in fact, and catch any service to anywhere pretty much there. And particularly if you don't have to, if you are not going to be able to get a direct service without a change from any one point to any other point. You're going to have to change buses. But the idea of this is it means you only need to change once. And as long as we get the ticketing sorted out, so you only buy one ticket, then it makes it a lot more convenient. And you should be able to get from anywhere within the city to another part. And actually one of the problems I find myself is the bus services in the city are useless for people who live in the city. And they shouldn't be. We do find we have to drive because your only choice is to take a bus into Drummer Street and then walk across to another stop somewhere, wait 10 minutes, and then get another bus out. You've paid for 2 fares, so you paid for a day rider to do that. And it's taken you probably 45 minutes, whereas you could have driven it in 10 minutes. I mean, it doesn't make sense.
Okay, thank you. Okay.
I was just wondering whether one possible solution might be to bring in something like the Oyster card, like they have in London, because that's really convenient when you're travelling across London.
Did anybody hear that? Bring in an Oyster card in Cambridge.
bringing an oyster card will be absolutely fabulous. The reason it works in London is because Transport for London runs all of the public transport services within London. We unfortunately have a deregulated bus service, so we have 2 different operators. We could have many more. I mean, there's no reason why it's only 2 and why Stagecoach is a virtual monopoly. Stagecoach is apparently going to bring in, I mean, it has its own version of an oyster card. It does have a card for, but it's only really useful to commuters because you can load it with a weekly or a monthly pass. It doesn't do the sort of daily capping which an oyster card does, and that's really what makes it convenient for the sort of ad hoc use of buses. And really there's no reason why Stagecoach couldn't do that. But the problem with Stagecoach doing it is it means you can't then transfer to a Whippet service. And this happens on a guided busway. If you wanted to buy a ticket that you can use on either service, it costs you more money. And the 2 services are, they don't talk to each other. It's just really difficult to work out whether it's worth spending the extra money for that. So yes, it would be lovely to have, and actually it really needs the initiative of the county council, and maybe that's a city deal project, would be to put in place the mechanism for all the public transport operators, including the train services. For local train services, it would be great if you could buy a single ticket that allowed you to get on a train somewhere, connect with a bus, maybe even pick up a bike to hire, and it was all done with one payment system that automatically capped for the day.
Great, thank you.
I was going to just say, again, the same lines as usual, Boris bikes. Again,
Yeah, Boris bikes.
Train station, perhaps going to the centre, or even at,
Yeah.
places as well.
Okay, I know lots of people will also have questions for Edward, but we do need to get on to our candidates as well, and there will be time afterwards for you to ask some more questions. And I just have one handed to me that seems quite appropriate, really, to finish with for Edward. I'll ask you first, and then it leads into very nicely our political candidates, because somebody said, this all sounds great, but many aspects will take years, to emphasise, to come to fruition, and in the meantime, we can't park on a daily basis. How can we influence politicians to get on and do something?
Well, actually, the city deal is under a very tight timetable. We're already a year into it, and the county council has to demonstrate that it has spent the first £100 million wisely, i.e. in a way that the central government demonstrates that it is supporting the growth of the region. So actually, given the time it takes to do consultations and to do all the traffic regulation orders and all the rest of it, do the submissions for getting contractors and so on, there is a long lead time to doing most things, certainly building things. And that's one of the reasons why railways just don't get much of a look in, because the lead time on those is such a long time. There's such a long process of the stage 1 to 9 and various different safety audits and all the rest of it. So it is a real problem. It would be fantastic if central government recognised this problem and actually cut some of the red tape for implementing new schemes. But parking controls actually are one of the simpler things to implement, and certainly if we do experimental traffic regulation orders, we could be doing those within a year or so. But we also need to be doing that hand in hand with other things. We can't just be punishing everybody who drives into the city without giving them something else in return. So we do need to be starting to work on upgrading park and rides and all the other things I was talking about.
Thank you.